that I always tell people I'm like a number 16 seed in the NCAA tournament. Okay, happy to be here. So I'm going to call Kevin Washington up here. Kevin is the. I'm going to make sure I get this right. Because he's the Associate Athletic Director for Mission, Impact, and Enrichment here at Baylor. And then that also entails being the athletics chaplain. So you want to grab a seat and we'll just get started. So one of the things that and before we get going, one of the things is we're going to talk with Kevin and then with some others involved in Baylor athletics. I've been in and around Baylor for the last few years. Our son went to school here. I have taught journalism as an adjunct professor, and as I've watched, and I've known Paul for several years now, and now I'm actually a student in the Master of Arts, kind of working on a master just for fun, theology and sports studies, because I feel like God still maybe wants to use the weird background that I have. I have really enjoyed watching how Baylor athletics strives to manage the inherent tensions, I think, of trying to follow Christ and help disciple student athletes while trying to win at the highest levels. And I know that is something that these guys deal with every day, and that's kind of some of what we'll talk about today. But I've really enjoyed watching how they're not paying lip service. These guys love Jesus, and they love people, specifically the people that they're working with and serving. And so that's really, I'm encouraged by that. Having seen how the sausage gets made sometimes in college athletics, I love how these guys are trying to make disciples. So I appreciate that. So Kevin, you and I know each other real well. We've met a couple times and had a chance to talk a couple times. Could you just tell us your story? I know you played college football at Notre Dame and then at Abilene Christian. And, how did you get here today? So just make it easy.
All right, well, I was born in 1980. No, I'm just joking. College athlete, that's where the Lord got a hold of me. So did athletics for my entire life, but the Lord got a hold of me in college athletics while I was playing football at the University of Notre Dame. I remember the distinct verse, Colossians 3:23, whatever you do enthusiastically, it's something done for the Lord, not for man. And there was this thought of why would I do this for God? Why would I do these things for the Lord? And he just took me on a journey through that time that just helped me understand that sport is more than just something that you can do to pass the time or an opportunity to make money. Sport is something you can do to actually form yourself, right? And I didn't understand that fully, but I understood what it was doing within me. And so I started there. I got saved there. That's when I started working with a lot of individuals in the youth around the city. I got done playing, and this is all part of the story, so bear with me for a second. I got done playing there, and I was the quintessential athlete that didn't know what he wanted to do when he got done, right? Because everyone says you're more than an athlete. I would say it too, but then I wouldn't do anything to back that up. So I got finished, didn't know what I wanted to do. And so then I decided to go to grad school so I could figure out what to do at the time. So I didn't want to go to grad school. I just needed the time to figure out my life. I went to grad school and continued playing at Abilene Christian. There was a coach there named Chris Thompson. He's at Florida State now. He loved the Lord. And he loved the Lord, but also wanted to win and compete. I'd never seen that in that way. And so I went to play for 2 years at Abilene Christian once I got done, got involved with FCA, then began working for FCA. But that passion to compete at a high level while also glorifying God and growing closer to him never subsided. And so while I was working for FCA, did that in Abilene for a few years with my wife. We moved to the University of Houston, did it there for a few years. Coach Tom Herman was there. He went up to UT, asked me to come there. We actually said no at first, and then we prayed about it and went up to UT and started working as the director of player development and serving as a chaplain for the Texas football team for the past 8 years. And then there's a Baylor employee that decided to come after me and wanted to recruit. And so she said, you should come to Baylor. And I said, no, I'm good. And she said, say it to my face. And that's literally what Juliana Smith did. She said, say to my face that you don't want to come to Baylor. So she had a face-to-face meeting with me, just like, all right, cool, just tell me that. And I said no. And then God said, are you sure? And we prayed a little bit more. And this is just a culmination of my passions, right? Competing at a high level, forming through sports, still being involved in sport. And so from there, it was a no-brainer to say, all right, how do we take this to another level? How do we actually put the work in to say what we worship, what we do is what everyone should see? And that's why we're at Baylor Athletics.
So, University of... My fault. That's a rookie move. Sorry about that. University of Texas football. Before that, University of Houston football. And now you're at Baylor. How is it different being at a university where there's a distinctively Christian mission versus, two public universities?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest difference is when you're just explicit at a Christian university, right? We're putting verses on it. We're making sure that everyone understands where we're coming from. When you're at a secular university, one that isn't, even though they have scripture around, which is interesting, when that's not what they're known for, you're not just as explicit with it. Everyone knew my role. Everyone knew who I was. I was about the scriptures. I was Bible studies. I was leading chapels and all of that. But it was finding a way in through excellence, I'll say, right? Is letting them see what you do, letting them see what you're about, walking with them, meeting with the guys wherever. And so it's not just starting off with, let me pray for you. It's not just starting off with, hey, I got this Bible study, do you want to join? It's finding the areas that they have need, finding the areas that they want to grow, coming alongside them, and then when they ask those questions, say, well, this is why, this is how. I think that's the biggest difference that I would say is you kind of find a different way in. To that point, I think that there's sometimes the expectation at a Christian university that it's more Jesus than excellence. I'm not saying that's here because I don't think I'd be here if that was the case. But I think that's unfortunate, right? Because I think it needs to be both, right? And so when I think about Daniel, right, because Daniel was one of the ones I studied really deeply while I was at University of Texas, they were known for who they stood for, not just what they didn't do. And every time they were brought up is because there's an excellent spirit in them. It's because they knew what they were doing. And so the outside world saw that they were excellent in what they were doing. And so that's where I think a lot of Christian universities, us as Christian universities, can continue to thrive and say, hey, we're not different than you. The same things that you're doing, we can just put the source on it, right? And so we got, PhDs in here. Congratulations to all of you that are doctors. I am an ABD. And so I appreciate you, and I'm sorry I could not join your ranks. But I just want to say mad respect for y'all. But what I see happening at the secular university is they're taking a lot of God's work and just plagiarizing it, right? And that's where I see us as a Christian university saying, hey, that same thing that's working over there is working because it's God's principle. And if I can show you that, there's a whole full picture that you might be missing on. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but those are just the small differences between a Christian secular university.
So
it might be the mic. I don't think it's you. Yeah. We're going to attribute it to the mic.
Yeah, I know that I didn't turn it off this second time. Okay, I just want to let you guys know that. I'm pretty sure anyway, but and it's red, so we may need another one if we can get one. But yeah, so you're talking about the differences. Are there some kind of challenges that maybe you didn't anticipate because you're at Baylor versus Texas versus Houston versus somewhere else?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is you're at a Christian university, so Christianity is the expectation. Right, and so anytime you're there, whether with your athletes or the outside world, they expect the Jesus piece. They don't necessarily expect the excellence piece, right? And that's where I think you've got to find creative ways, because I think we can become so saturated in the Jesus talk that's what it is. It's just Jesus talk. How do we make sure that it is authentic, it's genuine, and it's meeting people where they're at? And so that just takes intentionality to think through, how do I best connect with our students, with our coaches, with our administration, and how do we actually help them to live it out? So I think that's one of the challenges that I've even seen, like in the time that I've been here. Is like, okay, cool, like this is expected. I remember the first time I came here, I was super excited. Like we prayed like 3 or 4 times, like in a meeting. Like this is awesome. Like in every meeting, it doesn't matter. But I think it's just that thought of how do you bring all of those things together to make sure that it's not just the Jesus talk, right? Because I do want that to be part of what we do. Is we're always going to talk about Christ, but how do you also make sure that you don't water down the product as well? So
you're saying you didn't pray 2 or 3 times before like meetings at Texas?
I did. It was more internal, like Lord help me. It wasn't as forthright, if you will.
I got you. So when you get here, you're talking about the idea of winning at the highest levels, pursuing excellence individually and then as a team and that kind of thing. How have you found coaches, because they obviously understand the Christian mission when they get here, how have you found them to be the same or different, or what kind of tensions do maybe they have that are the same or different as at Texas or Houston?
Yeah, there's just an extra filter because they understand the call and they understand the job is not just the W's. but you can't ignore the W. Like, you can't ignore pursuing excellence. To do so, in my opinion, is to disrespect Christ. Right? You can't just say, hey, I'm just here to love Jesus. Like, okay, great. But David said, right, I will not offer to the Lord that which costs me nothing. And so we must be giving all of our offerings, give everything that we have. And so for Christian coaches, there's that extra filter of, all right, how do I do this in a way that's glorifying to God? But it's an offering to him as well, right? An offering that the world gets to see. And so if the world sees us just putting out bleh, right? Very, I know, scientific term, but if the world sees us putting out bleh, then that's the reflection that they're going to see, right? That's what they're going to attribute to Christ and to his work. And I think one of the things that Christian coaches, administrators, like everybody that is working in sports, to be honest, has to be aware of the unnecessary bifurcation of sport and faith, right? Because I hear us doing this all the time, and I hear it, and it bothers me, to be honest. How are you going to be competitive but also hold on to your Christian faith? And if you listen to the question, what they just said was, you can't be as competitive if you're holding on to your Christian faith. And that shows me that you have a watered down perspective of what Christ demands of us, but also empowers us to do. And so it's part of my mission, and that I'm hoping that we can come along with Baylor and do. It's like erase that imaginary line that people have, because to say that it discredits Christ and what he calls us to do. To say that if you're following your faith, you won't be as competitive. I'm not going to get on my soapbox right now, but I really want to. But that's just one of the things that I think we've got to be careful of. And as Christian administrators and coaches and working in the ministry, you've got to be careful not to begin to use the language and think that way, because you'll slip in. Right, it just slips in and you begin to think that we talk about formation all the time. That's how formation happens. It's the things that you watch, the things that you hear, that you're around all the time. And we can begin to buy into that. Like, oh, we're trying to keep our faith and be competitive. Like, just say I'm trying to keep my faith. The competitive piece comes along with that, if that makes sense.
One thing I know about you is you like to disciple individuals, and probably that's why you end up getting into it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but way back when you started. So you're working with the football teams at the two different schools. Now you're here, and I know you're working with the football team, but you're working with all the teams. You're working with staff. You're overseeing sort of, in a lot of ways, all of the different kind of sports ministry formation. Tell me how your day-to-day has changed, and how do you still impact individuals? What does that look like? Yeah.
The day-to-day has changed mainly because of the 3-year-old and the 9-month-old I have. So they get to dictate when my day starts and what we have in our day. But at work, the day-to-day is different because it's not as many one-on-ones with student athletes or with coaches, but it's trying to prayerfully think through, how do we strategically put people in places to disciple? And how do we make sure they have the resources, but then how do we also make sure that they are the right people for each of these teams? How do we create experiences for each of them? And so it's trying to come up with frameworks and ways to think through things that is going to best empower others to disciple, right? And so I think about it this way, is, trying to think through it has been hard because I'm used to being around football guys all the time, right? Used to all the smells and all the other kind of stuff. And you don't get that same time. But when you think about the impact, it's not just one team anymore. Now it's all of the teams at Baylor University, which is amazing. And then you see so many different people that are coming in to pour in. And so now it's just like what Jesus does, is you find the 12 and you find those people that go pour in each of those teams. And then you find a couple of student athletes here and there that you do get to pour into and you get to spend time with. And that's what we have the opportunity to do. And so it's a lot different, but it's still just as impactful as long as I'm thinking about it correctly.
Do you have more time for relationships and things like that with coaches and staff, or more entree for coaches and staff than you would have had previously, or is it sort of similar?
Not yet. So hoping that we'll get there. But in this first 6 months, it's been, let's just figure out what we're doing, what are the needs, what are the opportunities, who are the people, and then try to put some things in place that are going to say, okay, what is Baylor sports ministry, sports formation going to be about? And then let's begin to chase that down, find the right people and plug them in.
All right, I don't want to get into the grant that we're going to discuss too much here. You jumped into that in the middle of the year-long grant that Faith and Sports Institute here at Truett Seminary and Baylor Athletics collaborated on together. But from your perspective, kind of catching the second half of that, anything that struck you that really you were like, okay, that was an interesting finding or surprising?
I don't think the findings were particularly surprising. I don't think it was like, oh, wow, like there's people that do that. I don't think that's it. I think the thing that surprised me was that it was going on and that it was happening. Right. And so one of the reasons I'm excited to be at Baylor, so excuse my analogy, but it makes sense to me right now in this moment, so just rock with me, is it's helping people drink the Kool-Aid, right? And that sounds bad. You got to think about it. But like when I think about like making Kool-Aid, there are 3 ingredients to good Kool-Aid, right? You need the color, which is the flavor. You need the red stuff with the powder. You need the water, and you need the sugar. And if you're not adding sugar to your Kool-Aid, you can come over to the house and we'll help you out. I'll give you a taste of the good stuff. But what I'm seeing when I came in is like, this is amazing, is you've got research happening. Then you've also got the theology happening. But then you've also got the practice happening. So you're putting it all together. And so it's no longer just the practitioner's anecdotal, this is what I've seen happen. Or this is what student athletes are like. Or this is what they struggle with or what coaches need. Well, now you've got the research here. And so FSI is like, okay, great. Well, we've got researchers. We've got Elizabeth Bounds, and we've got Paul Putz. We've got these people doing the research to test what you're actually saying. And then we've got the theology to back that up as well. And so now the theology is being backed up by the science. And then you've got the practice of it. And so that is what really struck me, is saying, oh, we're not just talking about this and well, we believe it because we've seen it. I don't know, we've got the whole Kool-Aid here, we got the whole mix, and we're putting it all together, and we're getting to see how that fleshes out and how that works for everybody. So I think that was the biggest takeaway, was just even seeing that, is in general, to be frank.
Yeah, and so for those of you guys who maybe aren't as familiar with this, I was going to introduce it later, and so I broke the seal a little bit early. But the grant is to study character formation, specifically spiritual, but character formation among student athletes in Division I or in college athletics. And so that's kind of what you're referring to. Let me go back to one other thing, too. And this is sort of new within the last couple of years. And so your career in ministry spans before times when people didn't transfer all the time and when they weren't getting paid over the table, at least, right, for their abilities. And now we have the name, image, and likeness, NIL, and we have the transfer portal where you can essentially transfer when you want, about as often as you want. And it's a fundamentally different world in college athletics than it was before, especially at those, at college football, men's and women's college basketball, those kinds of levels. How has that changed things in terms of trying to disciple or even just to build character or build relationships?
Yeah. It's sped things up, and it has made us it's made me, let me speak for myself, become a lot more practical, like with the needs. And so when you knew you had 4 years, you can start off with, some of the more basic things. Let's talk through these things, right? But now you've got 18, 20-year-olds with 7 figures, more money than most people in their family have ever seen, more than they might ever see again in their lives. And they're not just answering the question of which dining hall do I want to go eat at? Who's handling the money? Who's coming at me for money? It changes their relationships. I've had conversations with student athletes, and they're saying, how do I put my parents on allowance? Like, how do I do these different things? And so now you're asking an 18-year-old to think generationally when they're still trying to figure out where their class is, what their major might be. But they're already making money, and we're telling them, you're more than an athlete, but sign this contract, and you're going to get this much money while you play, but it's not pay for play. And so the line between you're more than an athlete is getting blurrier and blurrier, and we've got to make sure they understand that you are, while still taking into account you do have resources that we can help you steward to think through now. And so you can't just ignore it. You've got to say, hey, money is not the root of all evil, right? It's not all evil, right? But there are things you need to be careful with that. And so you've got to be thinking through a lot more relationally. How do you help you work with relationships, right? Working with our mental health team. I think Dr. A's in here had a session, like working with them, like how does this impact the psyche, and how do we make sure we speak to that and preach to those things? It's just crazy important. But I think the thing that people miss is we can talk about the $1 million person, right? What about your student athlete that is here getting an education, will be here for 4 years and isn't going to make any money? Because now you've attached dollar signs to them, but not to the other. But your value's not in your sport. We're just not going to pay you 6 figures or 5 figures. We're going to give you a scholarship, and that's going to be it. And so now you're dealing with that as well, to saying, hey, we need to make sure you understand that you're still made in the image of God. So NIL is not just about these things. You got to understand the right name, image, and likeness that is on your life. Can I get an amen? But it's thinking through both of those things and thinking through all this stuff has been sped up. And so now when Jesus meets somebody at the well and begins to talk to them and begins to heal their felt needs, our student athletes are right there as well. And what I found is you will be cut off very quickly if you don't acknowledge that and help them walk through that. Because then it's you have an agenda and all you want to do is tell me about the scripture stuff. You don't care what I'm going through. You don't care that half of this money is going back to my family, or that I don't know what to do. Or you want to judge me because I bought another car. And I do want to judge you because your car's nicer than mine. But you've got to work through that piece. And so it's just made it a lot more practical, a lot more front lines to say, all right, where are you at right now? Let's walk through these things and not ignore them, because this is still a place that God has you, and this is a season of life that God has you in.
So this allowance for parents, I'm kidding. I don't want you to, no, the chores and all that kind of stuff. So,
I wish it was that simple.
Yeah. So you're at the end of your day, just a typical day, right? You go home. What's a win for you? What is it that you did that day, or accomplished or whatever, and you're like, this was what I'm here for. This is my purpose.
I don't do that.
That was unfair. I didn't tell you I was going to ask that. So.
You did not. A win, to be frank, is focusing on what I was supposed to focus on today. Just because there are so many other things that try to draw your attention. And so if there's these 3 things that I've set out, and so I try to figure out what are my big 3 for the day, like these 3 things got to get worked on. If I did the things that I set out to do that day, but still made time for the divine appointments that God made, that to me is a win. And if I can do that without bringing it all the way home, that's the ultimate win. Because I get home, my daughter still runs up to me, and so I'm trying to soak that up while I can. And so that is what makes it a win, is be faithful with what you're supposed to do, trust God with the things you didn't get to, and then be present when you get there.
Kevin, man, I'd love to keep talking with you, but we probably got to wrap this up. Let me just say, I'm so glad you're here. There's a lot of guys and men and women here who serve as chaplains, but getting to know you and getting to know what Baylor Athletics tries to do is one of the most encouraging things that I've seen in and around college sports in ever. So keep on keeping on, and thank you very much. I appreciate you. So.
Appreciate it.
So earlier I broke the seal on the grant that the Faith and Sports Institute of Truett Seminary and Baylor Athletics had earlier. I'd like to call up Dr. Paul Putz again, and then Juliana Smith and Kenny Boyd. I'll give you their titles, but I'll move over here too and let you guys have this, because but their titles. I'm sorry. So yeah, here. I'm going to make sure this thing works, and if not, you guys can have it. There you go.
George, before you get to titles, I just want to say, for those of you who know Waco's history with Colts, for Kevin to encourage y'all to drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah. So you can go back home. What did you do in Waco? We were encouraged to drink the Kool-Aid. There you go.
Yeah.
So the sports medicine guy says, change it. The sports medicine guy in me says, change it to Gatorade.
Yeah.
We can do that. That's on brand.
It was also a very specific recipe.
I wasn't gonna go there, Paul, but I'm trying to. This is where we are today, so let's do that as Waco. So, we'll just start going to my right. Kenny Boyd is Executive Senior Associate Athletic Director for Student Athlete Services, and Juliana Smith is the Executive Senior Associate Athletic Director for Mission Impact and Enrichment. And then you guys know Paul. Everybody knows Paul. If you didn't, you know him by now. Director of the Faith and Sports Institute at Truett Seminary. So you guys were part of a grant, I mentioned it earlier, this past school year from the Educating Character Initiative. And the idea was a collaboration between the Faith and Sports Institute and Baylor Athletics and kind of Baylor academics to explore and strengthen faith-based character formation in college athletics. And so I know the genesis kind of grew out of your research, Paul. Could you kind of give us kind of the big picture look at where it came from, what you were hoping to accomplish, how we got here?
Yeah, well, there are elements of my research that historically I was interested in, thinking about how faith and sports are connected for Christians throughout American history. But in terms of the on-the-ground research, Kevin mentioned Elizabeth Bounds. I'm a historian. I'm looking at the past. And so my role was really, who are the people we can get together who can do some research about what's happening right now and try to think about, at a Christian university, if you have an athletic department, what are the ways it can be aligned with the Christian mission of the university? And how can, not only can what can happen within Baylor, but how can Baylor be involved in conversations with other Christian schools? Because I know several of you in the room at your Christian universities, you're doing outstanding work already. So to think about what does it look like at Baylor, Power 4 athletics, to integrate these well, to connect what they're already doing, but to spread the word about that, and then to just get a sense of, hey, what are some gaps and what are some strengths? And to do that, it was conversations with Kenny, with Juliana. They have their own vision. They'll explain more of their why behind why this matters for Baylor athletics. But we realized, hey, there's something here where if we work together, we can do some good work for Baylor and hopefully for college sports as a whole. And out of those conversations, we got together and put this grant out.
Yeah, I guess that kind of feeds into this. Kenny and Juliana, could you guys explain kind of why it made sense for Baylor athletics? What enticed you about let's do this? Go ahead, Kenny.
Well, I'll start. And I think we weren't really sure what was happening. It was really more, I'll just say, early conversations with Paul and I were about, one, getting to know each other, what we can do to support and integrate resources together. And, oh, by the way, this distraction is happening around us in athletics of NIL and what that's going to be, transfer portals going crazy. And so we start having these conversations about how can we provide a resource that ultimately is going to help the athlete. And some of y'all in my previous talk yesterday have heard this term, but how do we help the athlete in the life cycle that they're going through? So not just when they're here on campus, but before they get here and after they leave, and how we can continue to be a resource for them. And so in our conversations with Paul and Faith and Sport Institute, and then Paul has his whole network of really smart people that are doing some really cool things on campus and elsewhere. And so we start having this conversation about what do we need to know? Like, what don't we know? And where's the starting point?
Yeah, and I came in on the front end of that, probably after preliminary conversations between Kenny and Paul. My role was created to essentially provide more structure around the spiritual growth pillar of Baylor athletics. We have four pillars within athletics. Now Kenny's going to test me. It's academic success, athletic excellence, character formation, and spiritual growth. And for a long time, spiritual growth had not gotten the attention and intentionality that we had envisioned it would have. And so I come in to basically develop a framework to allow Baylor Sports Ministry to be really a model program for athletics chaplaincy, particularly at the Power 4 level. There are chaplains on many campuses that aren't Christian at the Power 4 level. So how do we develop a system here that can be replicated on other campuses, even if it's not a Christian institution? So hence the grant. And before I got here, there was a study done across campus, and Paul probably knows the exact title of the study. But one of the findings from that study is that student athletes at Baylor had a higher level of religiosity than the general student population. And we wanted to pull that thread a little bit and figure out a little bit more about what factors contributed to that statistic.
That is an amazing thing, which was one of the things that I was interested to learn over the past year. Paul, could you outline a little bit, kind of 30,000-foot view of what you guys did in the study?
Yeah, it was very much an exploratory study. So it was a grant that was intended to be capacity building, which was sort of, to Kenny's point, figure some stuff out. Like get together, bring people in a room, talk, and do some survey research, but it's very much exploring. So we had a book group. We actually read Sabrina Little's book. This is perfect timing because she's the next keynote. So in the athletic department and with some other folks across campus, we read her book and we brought her to campus, and she did sessions with different constituencies with Baylor Athletics. We also created a group of people interested in this who are staff members in Baylor Athletics to participate both in the book group conversations and then in talking about some of these themes related to character formation. What are the challenges? What are the realities? Where I come from, I can write and talk about it like I know college sports. I don't know what's really happening on the ground, right? I'm over here in the seminary teaching, and the day-to-day realities are so different. And so it really was about learning from what those are like and trying to be there to help create a space and to provide some resources. We also did a survey with Elizabeth Bounds to just get a sense of what are the virtues being formed through the programming that Baylor Athletics has, and then along with that, thought through some research. What does the research say? What are the gaps in research that we need to explore? So it was fun. More than anything, it was getting to know one another and thinking about what could be next.
So I guess I would ask Juliana and Kenny, what was there some things that were confirming for you, and then maybe what was surprising to you that was kind of some of the takeaways? And Juliana, would you go first?
I was like, Kenny, happy to take that first. What was surprising to me? There wasn't much that was surprising to me, honestly. I was proud that we had the participation that we did across our staff, because to me that communicated that they were interested in not only contributing to the research, but also like learning what that could mean for them and their roles and how they can be better in supporting our student athletes and carrying forth our mission within Baylor Athletics. And so that was encouraging, really it was. And I think one of the things that probably wasn't surprising, but was a challenge that I was disappointed by was the student athlete participation. But it was expected, right? They're being pulled in a number of different directions every day. And I think reflecting back as one of the co-investigators, I'm thinking through how we could have done better in developing buy-in from our student athletes, from our student athlete leaders, and how we got them to participate so we can have, I guess, more actionable data.
Kenny.
Again, I don't know that it was a lot of surprising things as much as affirming or, again, opportunities there. I think it was interesting to see the amount of participation by our staff, which to me alluded to the desire to learn more about this and to be a part of a solution that's greater than just a team goal or something like that, that they want to be a part of, what we're doing in forming our student athletes. I do think that we have to be careful with our student athletes and knowing that not only are they being pulled in a lot of different directions because of personal and sport responsibilities or academics, but, we're an R1 institution. We have other studies going on. And we really need to be protective of how much they're being studied, right? And so being really critical of ourselves, of how we're prioritizing some of these projects, so that they understand when it's coming from us and we're asking, that they're going to be more willing to participate. The other thing, it was a reminder when you looked at some of the information of who they're talking to. And there's certainly, I think a lot of people in this room would understand this because you've in a lot of ways lived it. But the student athletes are talking to someone. They may not be talking to you, but they're talking to someone. And so identifying who those key people are was really interesting to see, because it was not always the head coach. And frankly, the head coach was way down the list. It was the operations director. It was a support staff member. It wasn't the head coach. And so that started us thinking about, well, if we're going to start this process of equipping our staff, the head coach needs to be involved. In fact, sometimes head coach leading will help get more buy-in, but we really need to target how our support staff are being equipped with the ways to work with our student athletes.
All right, so Kenny, you mentioned having said something about that in the breakout session yesterday. One of the other things you talked about, and this is sort of the reality that you guys are living in now, and I've mentioned it a couple times, you guys have alluded to it, but how does this study, how do you think this study is impacted by sort of the completely transactional nature that sort of college athletics is now in? I mean, that's kind of what the model is. Maybe it was always sort of transactional, but now it's like just sort of overtly, you're here, you're getting paid, and then you're going to move to the next place type of thing. How does that change, or do you think it changed the findings at all?
I guess we'll see. The next study that we do and the follow-up, the companion to that. And I'll also say what he said. Kevin, I think, really spoke to it really well in the fact that, we do have student athletes that are making a lot of money, but we also have athletes that are still scholarship, cost of attendance, and how do I get by? And our job, I feel like, is to try to bridge that gap, but also understand that we're not going to be the solution, and we really need to learn how to be present. And being present means I don't have the answer, but I'm going to acknowledge and I'm going to see you where you are, and how can I help walk with you to maybe find the answer, because everything is going to be so unique, every situation, that we can't have a policy and procedure that's built around everything you're going to encounter. So how can we equip our staff to handle the uncomfortableness of sitting in silence with an athlete that has no understanding of why this is happening to them? And so, I think that's what I see, and the challenge that we have, the opportunity that we have. I think the opportunity is also in how we model that. If they see us freaking out, then they start to get worried. And so how can we be present in a way that's calming and reassuring, and not doom and gloom, to try to find those opportunities?
Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
It's a fresh example on my mind this weekend as I've been engaging in the conference. We've also been hosting a prospective student athlete on campus for women's basketball. And part of my role is I serve as general manager, which means I manage, alongside our head coach, our revenue share budget, like how much we're paying student athletes within that team. And I'm sitting there with the family, and this particular student athlete, we weren't going to tell her what the number was. We wanted her to make a decision about Baylor without knowing the number. And her mom at the end of the meeting said, "I want to know how much you value my child." And my heart broke, because she went on and on and on, and then the conversation kind of shifted. And my response to her was, "I want you to know that we value your child no matter what the number is. And she should not take that number as the depth to which she will be valued in this program, because that's not how we operate." And I would have hoped, Mom would "Oh my gosh, she's coming, she's committing, we'll figure out the number later." Mom was like, "Okay, thank you, we still need a number." And to that point, I think it's really important we've been talking, Kenny even mentioned about prepping our staff and how we respond in those situations that are continuing to be aligned with our mission and philosophy and values of how we do what we do here at Baylor. We have money. She will get paid if she decides to come here. But that's not the thing that should be the decision-making factor for that family. For a lot of families, it is an opportunity for them to change the way they're able to live. And, it's a blessing, surely. And I think it's different, or it's hard in this new season because that's not happening when she's going on other visits, right? That's not happening in other sports and things like that. And so it's just so, to the point, it's so critical that we continue to do this work the way we're doing it because it matters and it makes a difference.
Absolutely. Man, those are the kind of things that some of you guys are dealing with, but that most of us don't understand. And so thank you for valuing these young people who are made in God's image. I appreciate that. Thank you. So beyond this study, I would like to ask the two of you guys, Juliana and Kenny, what's your hope beyond this study for the future of kind of character-based spiritual formation, character formation, spiritual formation at Baylor, and then maybe beyond Baylor? How does this, translate out beyond to the next school?
I would say that my hope is that we continue to believe and commit to believing that it's worth the risk of being different than everyone else. It's worth the risk of a parent saying, well, everyone else is fill in the blank. I'm like, well, Baylor's not everyone else. The way we do the things we do here, how we care for your child when they're on our campus and in our care is, it should be different because of the things we value most. And so I hope we as practitioners, coaches, advisors, don't get discouraged that folks are going to say, nah, we're good, we just want the check. And that's okay. Because oftentimes they might come back the second time around because the check might not have been worth it wherever they went the first time. And we've seen that before where we win on the second recruiting visit, right? Because they spent the year and yeah, y'all were right. Everything you talked about, we didn't experience that at this other place, even though they said we would. So I hope that we continue to stand in that gap for sure.
Kenny.
Yeah, it's how much time do we have?
Yeah, you got plenty of time. Just keep going.
I think we like to use light analogies here, and I hope that, and kind of just following up on what Juliana says, I hope that we can be a light in the room and acknowledge that people are going to leave the room, but when they come back, the light's still on. And however that looks in our programming, our teaching, our coaching, the press conference interviews, and however that plays out, can we still have the light on? And I think this is not my job ultimately, it's our job. And I think, when you look at other institutions and other schools that are trying to do this in the same way, how can we encourage each other, whether you're a Power 4 or you're NAIA Division 3, whatever it is. We're still called to do something greater than just what's happening on the court. And so, we can learn a lot from each other in situations like this. Using something that was said earlier, maybe leveling it up a little bit, but can we strive to thrive to exist in the tension? And I don't know what tomorrow's tension is going to be. 5 years ago, the tension was a pandemic, and now the tension is about professionalizing college sports. There's still people involved. There's still people to influence and support. So that's what I hope we continue to do, and realize that in this study and the book that we studied with Dr. Little, there wasn't a big group. It was 40 at best, 30 to 40 people within a staff of 250, 300. But it was 30 to 40 people that were interested in finding a better way to do something better, to do something impactful. So it doesn't have to be anything grand. It doesn't have to be led by, world-renowned authors like Dr. Putz here. But it can be led by anybody that's just willing to lean in and do the work and embrace the distractions around you, but find time to be able to do the work. So.
Well, you could keep going, and I know that, but I know Paul wants to keep us on schedule here. So let me just say this. As a sports fan and a former sports journalist and as a pastor, thank you guys for your commitment to Christ and to working to try to figure out how to be transformational in a transactional business model. I'm so grateful for that continued commitment, even as you guys have to continue to adjust, hour by hour, it seems like these days. So I'm grateful for you guys. Thank you so much. And I'll continue to pray for you, and I mean that. So would you guys give them a hand and thank them?